Well, good morning, everybody, to a Tuesday. Thank you for joining me on the Daily Dose. I'm always thankful to have you guys with us as we just walk together through this time. Today, I am joined by my friend, Jason Atchley. Of course, it's Dr. Jason, so we're going to have to traverse that moment as well. But anyway, today on the broadcast, we're going to talk about life after the pandemic, and what does life look like on the other side. And Jason has developed a playbook, a message, if you will. We're going to break that down into three parts. Today, we'll talk about part one. And then he's also going to be with us tomorrow and Thursday. So I'm excited to have him on here. I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself and share about himself a little bit. So right now, I see Vanda and Francie, Norma and Vicky. Hey, good to see you guys. I know some others will be catching on and checking in here in just a second. So, but right now, I just want to introduce Jason Atchley to you. Jason, as I mentioned yesterday on the broadcast, between assignments of God right now, and yet also serving as our second vice president for the Texas Baptist General Convention. So, of which I am also on the executive board, and we're just serving Texas Baptist, and we're serving where God has us planted at this moment. So, hey, Jason, take a minute if you would introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hey, well, good morning to the Crowley family and anyone else joining us there on social media. It's a privilege to be a part of this. I've been watching what Aaron's been doing for several weeks now during the quarantine time as we've all been home. And I'm here in the Houston area, Southeast Texas, at my mom and dad's house. And so found a little quiet spot out here amongst the trees on the back porch to be with you guys. And just as we've all kind of processed through this, have been working on what ministry looks like for me moving forward, for the church, globally and overall, and how this is going to be different for us. And I think that's a good thing. I think there are some lessons we can learn from that. But I've been in ministry in a number of different areas for 25, going on 26 years. Aaron mentioned I served the Baptist General Convention of Texas, second vice president in my second year. And I bring you greetings from Dr. Michael Evans, our president, as well as Dr. David Hartage, our executive director. So, Aaron, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, how long have you been married? And tell me a little bit about your kids.
Yeah, so we've been married. We'll be 26 years this summer.
Same
here. We are one of those that got married right out of high school. And so young loves at 18, and somehow we've made this thing work. And have been in a number of churches ever since then. Went off to Howard Payne and then did 2 degrees at Hardin Simmons. And then I have 2 girls. I have a 19-year-old, my daughter Hallie. She's an online student here with Houston Baptist University. And then I have a 16-year-old. So she's not yet been able to get her driver's license because the DPS office is closed.
Right.
So you can pray for her. She's not very happy about that.
I bet.
But she is a sophomore here at Klein High School. So
okay.
We're living it up in the Houston area and sweating, but I did get my hair cut yesterday.
Now, you spent the last several years out in the Lubbock area. Are you a Tech fan? Now, are you a Tech fan? Because, I don't know how long I can keep you on here. So
Right. No, I am the Longhorn fan.
I thought that was true. I thought you were a Longhorn guy. So I was wondering how that played with you out in Lubbock. So.
Yeah. You know what? For the most part, those folks treated me well, and we had a good rivalry there. But it was different being a Longhorn fan in Raider land.
That's right.
But I came out unscathed. I'm good.
There you go. All right. Hey, Jason, we're on the Daily Dose today, and you have developed a little bit what you're calling the Post Pandemic Playbook. And as I mentioned to you before the broadcast, I think I'm working through something along the same lines, just talking about what's life like on the other side of COVID-19. We've been now knee deep or waist deep or neck deep in this thing for 5 weeks. trying to manage what Zoom is. Most of us didn't even know what that was leading up to that. But specifically trying to school people at home, work from home, shop from home, can't get out, got a mask and glove up now, but we see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so we've kind of put this together. And so I just want to walk through a little bit of what you're thinking and just help us with this playbook as well. So what percentage of us do you think is going to go back to life as usual, having no changes at all from what we were beforehand? And do you think that's a good thing?
Well, let me answer that in two parts. I'll answer the question and then answer the question with a question. So I think to answer the question, what percentage of us will go back to life as usual? I I think it's a pretty low percentage. Hey, support the Big 12. Aaron? I hope to see a UT Cup come by here in a minute, but I probably won't. I don't think really many of us will go back to life as usual, as we knew it, what we might define as normal. I think
Exactly.
98 plus percentage of us want it to go back that way,
Okay.
but I think very, very few will. So I think even more of the question is what percentage of us need for that to go back to normal? And maybe needs not the right word. Want it to go back to normal. We just want things to be like they were before this, and that's like saying we want things to be like they were before 9/11, and it's just not going to happen. I think we have a unique opportunity, and I'm an overly optimistic person, but I think we've got a unique opportunity to really change, make some difficult decisions. That's going to require a lot of conversations. Um, but you talked about learning to shop from home and work from home. We're learning to worship from home, and
True.
and that
True.
seems new, right? That seems different, but that is the biblical model. I mean, Deuteronomy 6. It's all about the domestic church. It's the home church, and I, I'm not saying we shouldn't gather because I'm looking forward to being with my church family here
Oh,
at
absolutely.
Woodland First Baptist. Um, but I think there are aspects of the home church emphasis that we can take and we can keep and we can use and adapt and move forward with those things. And um, man, I think there's some good stuff from 1 Corinthians 13 about how we can adapt, and maybe
Sure.
change is not the right word, but adapt to a new normal.
A question from one of our listeners. How are the really small churches bearing up under this? As you have, I'm sure, visited with lots of churches in the area. Some don't have the equipment to do streaming. Even though I know Facebook Live can be done from a phone, I've seen pastors putting it on the pulpit right there in front of them and just getting after it. What are you hearing? What are you seeing going on?
Yeah. Well, Kay, thank you for the question. That's a great question because a lot of them are struggling. Some of them don't even have internet access at their churches. So, Wi-Fi as we know it and take advantage of it, and they don't have those things. And so they're struggling. And the sad reality of what might come of this is the same thing as it may happen. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. If your name is Debbie, forgive me. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus there. But there'll be some businesses, small businesses, that won't come back.
Yeah.
And the sad reality is there'll be some small churches that won't either. A lot of our bivocational churches are struggling, um, but our BGCT and the fine folks at that building are working nonstop at home, and Dow Loftus and Dr. Hardage and those guys are trying to find financial resources to help them, as well as trying to find some areas that they could ping off of to try to do some streaming. I was talking to a friend of mine in Lubbock, Tiny Dominguez. Shout out to my boy Tiny. A few weeks ago, we talked regularly, but about one of these things is how are some of these churches that how do you do drive up church with a 2-year-old in the back seat,
Hmm.
and get something out of the message?
It's a whole new ball game. Church planners have been dealing with this for years now.
Yeah, and they're probably saying, "Welcome to the club," to the rest of
Right.
us.
Welcome to my world for a moment.
Yeah, they're probably saying, "Man, I've been dealing with all these kind of heartaches, for a long time." And so I think, again, I think that word, and I'm not trying to just drive it into the ground, but it's adapting.
Hmm.
And so, how do we adapt? And then, Kay, I think the next move is, how do we help some of these smaller churches adapt? Not just think they're going to do it, but how do we bring them along, and how do we come alongside them and partner with them
Yeah,
and help them get Wi-Fi? And I think that could be a different way of doing missions moving forward. That's a good thing.
sure. Now, in your lesson, and we're going to get there here in just a minute, but in your lesson, you suggest that going back to the way you were doing it 2 months ago with no changes, that this would be actually dangerous.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, I think that David Hollis had a great quote the other day. I want to make sure I get him right. He said, "In our rush to return to normal, we should use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to." And so I think it'd be dangerous just to all of a sudden the quarantine's lifted, the restrictions are lifted, and we rush back into what we thought, and maybe, could I say, idolize, lusted after, when it comes to worship. And that's why I think 1 Corinthians 13 is so critical, because it finds itself right between chapter 12 and 14, right? That doesn't take a very strong mathematician to figure that out. But
That's
those
the
two,
Lubbock in you.
yeah, that's a lovely thing. I didn't go to tech, so I don't have a math degree. Um, but it's right between this dispute of spiritual gifts.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
between this place where you've got, people who are, they're in the midst of conflict over communion. They're
sure.
struggling. They're taking each other to court. They're impatient with each
Right.
other. Um,
Kind of like
they're-
Ephesus, they forgot their first reason to exist.
exactly, and they're just there because they're there. It it's what we do. It's a part of our schedule. It's um, we get up, we go to church, we go out to lunch, we go home, take a nap, we go about the rest of our day. Maybe we come back for church that night or a Bible study class. We get up and go to work the next day. And there's really no change in that. It just becomes routine. And I think that's the dangerous part, because Paul's saying that even if your music and your preaching and your service, if there's nothing that's different, then you're really not loving people very well. You are just simply going back to what a friend of mine would say, a doctrine of past practices.
Yeah, yeah. Now you're calling this a playbook.
Yeah,
Why do you think it's important to have a playbook for after this is over?
sure. Well, one, I think it's a gift that we've been given to kind of have this downtime,
Hmm.
right? I know it's been forced, and it seems like it's not good, but I think we've had an opportunity to kind of pull back and look at some things. Right when this happened, the Associated Press came across the wire that Tom Brady was leaving New England and was
Right.
going to Tampa Bay to be the quarterback, right? And I'm not a Tom Brady fan, so if you're out there and you are, God bless you. I
I
mean,
think
he's
you're in good
incredible.
company.
Okay, all right, good. All right, I love the Crowley family.
He
So,
graduated Michigan. How can we like that?
yeah, exactly. Boo the Wolverines. So, but think of what this. You think about what a great athlete and quarterback that he is, and think about the gift of the pandemic for Tom Brady. You have given him all this time to study a brand new playbook. And so when he comes out of there, man, when the
Sure.
season starts, he has the potential of being more dangerous as an athlete and quarterback than he was before. And so the downtime for us is, it gives us a chance to study our playbook, to really dig in and learn, relearn, apply some of the lessons that that are in our playbook, and not just the overall scriptures, but this particular chapter, because I think it's so important. We use it at weddings. We talk about how we should love, and love is patient, love is kind, and we'll look at those verses tomorrow. But man, how does that define me as a believer? How does that define the church? Because Paul's not talking about a physical romantic love. He's talking about that agape love, and we know that unmerited, that unwarranted kind of love. And do we love our music? Do we love a style of preaching? Do we love our service ministries more than we love one Jesus and two people? And I
I mean,
think that's
Jason, I
where
didn't
Paul's
bring my
going.
steel-toed boots today, so you're getting now the preacher's coming out in you, and that's awesome. Now now
It's called the camp down.
you're touching on some things, music, preaching, service, that are near and dear to 99.9% of church-going folk.
Yeah.
And so, what are these some problem areas that you see that we might face as we return to an open situation? And how do you think we should address those things?
Yeah. So I do think that we have a strong value. And listen, I grew up in a traditional church. I was
Mhm.
part of a four-part quartet, sang gospel music for a long time in my life. I have a strong affinity and love for the hymns of the faith and the newer contemporary music. The struggle is you won't find the terms traditional or contemporary in Scripture.
That's right.
And so here's
It's
these
just
three
music.
verses that say again.
It's just music.
It's just music. Yeah, and it's joyful noise to the Lord, from the
Mhm.
Psalms. But here's what Paul says: if I speak of human or angelic tongues, but I do not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I love my music more than my maker, then my music becomes an idol to me, and it becomes what I fashion church around. Is that's the place that I go and I sing songs, or I learned them through VBS as a child. But man, those songs, right? How great thou art penetrates into the depth of my soul.
Right.
I can sing that wherever I'm at, and I should be able to sing that in my reactions to the people I come in contact with. Otherwise, I'm just a gong, I'm a clanging cymbal. People don't realize how great God is if I can't love them despite the differences that we might have.
Okay.
He says, I have the gift of prophecy and understand all the mysteries and all knowledge. And if I have all the faith so I can move mountains, but I do not have love, I'm nothing. There's this idea of if the preacher doesn't preach the way I want him to, or the style, or use the translation I want, how does that affect then the way that I reflect the love of Jesus to other people? And then he says in verse 3, and if I give away all my possessions, and if I give over my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. There is this, Paul is saying, if the spotlight of your service is on you, and it's not on who Jesus is and why he has changed your life that has led you to do these acts of service, then you're really not loving him, one, and you're not loving people, because it's all about trying to be right and to be seen as a holy person. And I think that's the rub, and maybe that's the danger even in some ways, where what did they see from the church pre-pandemic, and what are they going to see from the church post-pandemic that's different? And that's a gift if we will put aside our preferences a little bit and love people well. I'm not saying forsake those, do away with them, get rid of everything of what we know to be church, but why we do them, and the emphasis of them, and how we are using those things on a Sunday morning gathering to then go out into the communities that God has planted us to be the light and love of Jesus through music, preaching, service. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Susan's asking a question. So kind of like 9/11, when we go back, do we anticipate an initial increase in church attendance? And if so, how do we keep them? I'll just let me start on that a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
the podcast I listen to, the people that I read right now are actually suggesting that 49% of churches actually have more attendance now than they did, even though we're all online. You're probably reading the same things I am.
Yeah.
But when we all go back, do we sense that we will have this continued increase of attendance? How do we continue to incorporate them, keep them, if you will, in good Baptist lingo? How do we keep them
Yeah.
and keep them coming? And how do you see? There's a lot impacted into this question, but how do you also see our online going? Some guys I know have said, well, I'm just ready to get back to normal and get off this online stuff. But I think if you get offline, you're gone. So
Yeah.
address that with us.
Yeah. So, Susan, thank you for your question. That is a powerful question. I think there are similarities to 9/11 as far as just requiring us to make uh, some uh, some adjustments as we kind of move into this new normal. Um, I don't know that we can say there'll be an increase in church attendance as far as people showing up to a building. And I think that may be even part of the mentality shift is church the location, or is church what we're doing right here? And I would say church is what we're doing right here. We're in two different locations, but man, we're having church, and we're learning, and God is with us, and the Spirit of the Lord is here, and so attendance is going to look different. And I think we have to maybe adapt how we count things. We love numbers in Baptist life, and
Right.
that's how we determine growth. And I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know that um, shows quality of what we're doing, and how we're loving Jesus and loving people. But so that's, Susan, I think, an excellent question, because I've had to kind of wrestle in my mind. Um, have we made it too easy for people not to come to the local church
Sure.
building because of
Right.
streaming and social media and other opportunities? Is it just going to be, well, I don't need to go because I can sit on my couch and I can be there? Um, you know, uh, I think there's going to be that battle. I think there's going to be um, that that struggle for some. And so I think, though, that puts the onus back on us as the church. In how are then we welcoming them? And is there just this expectation that in order to be part of the fellowship, you got to show up on Sunday morning?
Now, there was
Um,
something I was reading yesterday, Jason, that said um, those that won't come to church and they're more inclined to be online likely wouldn't have come to your church to start with,
I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, they were already doing church online to begin with.
or not at all.
Uh, but here's the flip side of that.
Hmm.
Genesis tells us, right, that God made all things good, but then he looked and he said, it is not good for man to be alone. Now, here's another passage like 1 Corinthians 13. We tend to think that's about getting married. That's not what he's saying. He's
Right.
saying it's not good for you to be in isolation. It's not good for you to
Right.
be disconnected from the relational aspect that you were hardwired in your DNA as a human to have. And so that's not good. So we need that togetherness at the church in order to be the church. And I think we have to think about keeping people different than just keeping them on our roll, but keeping them engaged in the life of the church.
Right.
Listen, I found in all my years, I was a 20-year youth guy. I did discipleship and family ministry, kind of in an associate role for a while. I did 5 years as a senior pastor. So I've done a lot of different roles. And
Mhm.
I've always found that those who are new, so let's use Susan's question as somebody who they saw you online. They want to come and see the family of First Crowley. They want to know who these people are. They're longing for a relational connection with
Hmm.
people, and they come there. And if we say, "Listen, you got to be on the rolls for 6 months before you can do X, Y, Z," then it's probably we're not going to keep them very long because they're excited. They're ready to be there. And those who are new are always have the most energy I have found to get involved in service ministries, to be engaged in mission opportunities, to they're they're palpable to what the Word of God says, and they're sponges. They absorb those kind of things. But if we have to have certain sets of rules and regulations, and I'm not saying we have to have steps of discipleship,
Sure.
but discipleship's different than do this, and if you show yourself approved there, then we'll let you do this. I think that's when people go, man, I'll just watch this online and I can gain just as much from what
we were
Pastor Aaron
we
said.
were having a conversation a couple of months ago as we were developing these 5 things that I shared with you before the broadcast. The next 5 weeks of my pulpit ministry, with accept and acceptance being the first thing.
Yeah,
This is along the lines of what you're talking about. That we have to be willing to accept people as they are. And one of the complications that rose up in that conversation was the fear of the possibility of condoning a particular lifestyle or condoning certain things that are unbiblical. And I tried to help them, and I think I accomplished it, but tried to help them. And I would like everybody to understand that accepting somebody as they are is exactly what God did for us pre-Jesus.
absolutely.
And to accept them as they are, to love them and to help them move along their life journey is different than saying what you're doing is right. And I think we can't speak into the right wrong of their life until they've seen that we actually will love them as they are.
Yeah, yeah. You know the old adage, right? I
Yeah,
think it's still true.
right.
Um, Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And
That's right.
I think that is still, applicable to what we're trying to do in the life of the church. And so, yeah, and that's where our actions are really going to be important. I think we can say in a loving way, this is wrong. This is what Scripture says. And of course, we love to kind of have this working list of, oh, these are top sinners, these are not so bad. Um, you know, John Randall's one of my mentors used to say, people love it when the preacher preaches on sins they never plan to commit. But if you start preaching on something that they're struggling with,
Right.
if you start preaching on a sin that they have, dealt with for a long time, that's when they start going, that preacher, you need to talk about these things. You know? let,
That's more
let,
true
let's
than you
talk
know.
about yeah, yeah. Let's talk about those that are, those things that are wrong, not the things that are, not so bad, but I need to change, and I know that. But those people,
Yeah.
you know, um,
The get
and
'em
that,
sins.
yeah, the get them, and that. Listen, people
Go
knew that
get
of the
them, but
church
don't talk to
before.
me.
Exactly, exactly. People knew that about the church though before.
Right.
So it's an opportunity to change our verbiage a little bit and mean it, because that's going to be pivotal. Not just going, yeah, yeah, you're not so
Right.
bad after all,
Right.
but to say, I love you, and I'm invested in your life here on planet Earth, so that you can spend eternal life with Christ and with me. And man, I think that's the depth of where Paul begins on this agape love.
Right.
Is if people think it's about church is about music, preaching, and service, and not about loving people, they're not going to come anyway.
Yeah. Hey, final question today. You talked about what it would be like in a new and different way of doing missions. This concept of online ministry could actually be what I might say is online missions, which changes our missiology a little bit. I think our missions mindset, I think our attitude's been changing over the years anyway, from having to go overseas to do missions to now we just have to go across the street to do missions.
Yeah.
George brought this question up, and actually, George is in the hospital right now texting in this
Wow.
question. So,
George, thank you, my friend.
hey, could you just expand a little bit on that for us, would you?
Yeah, so I was on a Zoom call yesterday with a group of young pastors and young leaders in our Texas Baptist Life, and let me tell you, they are outstanding, sharp men in a lot of different roles within their church. And one of those guys talked about how he was leading their church to even rethink George missions financially. They had a budget plan going into the year, and now they're looking to shift those budget dollars to feeding families and to doing missions a little bit differently. So I think missions is going to be one of those pivotal points for us to not just maybe change where we go and what we do, but how we are stewarding our missions dollars. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? And I hear me, I'm not going against cooperative program or any of those kind of
Sure,
things, because those
sure.
are important. Those are dollars that are set, right?
Hmm.
Percentages that are there. But those flexible monies, if you will, resources. It doesn't even have to be money. It could be resources. It could be time. It could be new partnerships that are going to be developed with the local church and the school district or other nonprofit entities and organizations. Because if the church does their job well, if the church is who she was designed to be, then all these needs are met in the first place.
Hmm.
I think why you have food banks and why you have big brothers and big sisters that are all fantastic entities and organizations, the reason they exist is because the church hasn't done those things like we should. And so it's an opportunity to rethink, reimagine, re envision missions holistically, including the dollars that we fund.
Well, Jason, I have enjoyed this conversation today. I look forward to expanding further into this chapter, this great chapter, the love chapter. I think we have all been calling it over the years.
Yeah,
As we just dive down a little bit more in tomorrow's episode, as we look at some priorities and how we set some priorities based upon a love foundation. So, Jason, again, thank you for being with us
my
today.
pleasure.
And we'll get back tomorrow, and we'll see you again tomorrow. So appreciate it, and we will look forward to visiting with you again in the morning.
Great, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to all those who tuned in today. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you for being with us on the Daily Dose. I am appreciative of you being with us and joining with me this morning, just as we look ahead into what is coming, the end of the pandemic, a new era for Christianity, a new era for church life. How will we manage that? How are we going to maneuver through that? Join me again tomorrow as we will continue this conversation with Jason as we continue to visit on this. Thank you all. You all have a great day, and God bless.